Stop. You are about to kill yourself. I had commanded emergency medical teams for nearly 3 decades, and I had never shouted those words until the morning an ordinary human walked into Trauma Bay 7 carrying nothing more than a worn backpack and an expression that suggested he had somewhere else to be. My name is Dr. Kaylor Vex, Chief Medical Officer of Meridian Station, and before that day, I believed medicine was universal. Chemistry was universal. Biology was universal. Every intelligent species obeyed the same fundamental rules, even if their anatomy differed. Then Ethan Carter quietly stepped through our emergency entrance, and everything I had dedicated my career to teaching began unraveling in less than 60 seconds. The station scanners immediately identified him as a human male from Earth employed in civilian cargo logistics. Average height, average build, white skin, elevated heart rate consistent with physical activity. A moderate injury across his left forearm requiring immediate treatment. Standard procedure automatically assigned him the highest non-critical priority, and my staff moved toward him with regeneration equipment already prepared. Ethan raised his free hand with a polite smile before anyone reached him. I appreciate it, doctor, but this one is pretty straightforward. At first I assumed the translator had failed. No patient voluntarily declined the finest emergency medicine available in known space. I explained that delaying treatment increased unnecessary risk, but he simply nodded as though we were discussing tomorrow's weather instead of his own health. I understand, he replied calmly. I just need a clean place to take care of it. His confidence unsettled me far more than the injury itself. Around the room, my physicians exchanged uncertain glances. One nurse quietly activated additional monitoring. Another prepared emergency stabilization medication in case the human suddenly collapsed. Ethan seemed completely unaware of their concern. He placed his backpack on the examination table, unzipped it, and began searching through its contents with the relaxed efficiency of someone looking for a phone charger instead of medical supplies. My assistant whispered that perhaps humans carried specialized field equipment unavailable in the Alliance. Another guessed he had portable nanotechnology designed specifically for Earth physiology. Neither assumption survived very long. Ethan removed a simple glass bottle filled with a clear amber liquid. Every chemical sensor in the room identified it instantly. Ethanol, 40% concentration. Classified throughout the Galactic Alliance as a hazardous solvent requiring controlled handling procedures. My pulse quickened before I consciously realized why. Mr. Carter, I said firmly, extending my hand toward the bottle. Please give that to me immediately. He looked down at it, then back at my face with genuine confusion. Why, he asked. Because exposing living tissue to that substance could produce severe biological damage in nearly every known species. Ethan blinked once, smiled politely, and answered with complete sincerity. Really? We keep this stuff in our medicine cabinets. Before anyone could react, he loosened the cap and slowly lifted the bottle toward the injury. Every alarm inside Trauma Bay 7 activated at the same instant, but none of those warning sirens frightened me as much as the calm expression on the human's face, because it was painfully obvious he did not believe he was doing anything unusual. He believed he was simply following the same ordinary first aid routine that millions of people on Earth had probably learned long before they ever met a doctor. The bottle tipped only slightly before the first drops reached the injury, and every emergency system inside Trauma Bay 7 immediately escalated from caution to critical response. Bright crimson warning lights swept across the ceiling while the station medical intelligence announced a hazardous chemical exposure event in its calm mechanical voice. Around me, experienced physicians stopped moving altogether. One nurse instinctively stepped backward. Another quietly reached for an emergency neutralizing agent that would normally be used after accidental industrial contamination. Ethan Carter did not appear frightened in the slightest. He drew a slow breath. As the liquid touched the injured skin, his shoulders tensing for barely a heartbeat before relaxing again. Then, as if following a routine practiced countless times before, he placed the bottle on the examination table, reached into his backpack, and removed a folded piece of sterile gauze. His movements were steady, careful, and remarkably ordinary. He gently cleaned the area, inspected it under the examination lights, and nodded to himself with quiet satisfaction. To him, it looked like another small task completed during a busy day. My attention shifted to the medical scanners surrounding him. Every monitor continued streaming data across the central display faster than my staff could read it. Heart rhythm stable. Blood oxygen normal. Neurological activity unchanged. Stress hormones elevated only slightly before returning toward baseline. Cellular repair had already begun according to the biological imaging system. None of it made sense. I ordered an immediate secondary scan using an independent diagnostic platform manufactured on another world. The numbers matched perfectly. A third scanner was activated. The results remained exactly the same. The room became so quiet that I could hear the cooling fans inside the analysis equipment. Ethan noticed everyone staring at him and offered an apologetic smile. "Did I mess up your equipment?" The question was so sincere that several younger physicians simply looked at one another without speaking. I slowly stepped closer, unable to ignore the impossible evidence appearing on every screen around us. "Mr. Carter," I asked carefully, "were you expecting that procedure to be uncomfortable?" He nodded. "Of course. It always stings for a little while." Stings. The translator confirmed the word without hesitation. He had just described a substance categorized throughout the Galactic Alliance as an aggressive industrial solvent with the same casual tone someone might use when talking about cold weather. Before anyone could respond, Ethan opened a small roll of medical tape and neatly secured the clean dressing over the injury. There was no hesitation in his hands and no uncertainty in his expression. He had clearly repeated this exact sequence many times before. My deputy physician quietly whispered, "Chief Medical Officer, he is not reacting like someone surviving something extraordinary. He is reacting like someone finishing an ordinary household chore." Those words struck me harder than every warning alarm combined. Around us, the emergency systems gradually silenced themselves one after another as the predicted biological collapse failed to appear. Instead of treating a worsening medical crisis, we were witnessing an average human calmly completing basic first aid, while an entire department of alien physicians struggled to understand whether our medical science had just failed us or whether humanity had been quietly living by a completely different set of assumptions all along. I refused to believe the scanners until I had exhausted every possible explanation. Machines could malfunction. Sensors could drift out of calibration. Databases could contain incomplete information about newly encountered species. But 3 independent medical systems producing identical readings was something I had never witnessed in my entire career. I instructed my staff to begin a complete metabolic evaluation while Ethan Carter remained seated on the examination table. To my surprise, he simply nodded. "Go right ahead," he said with an easy smile. "If it helps, I am not in a hurry." There was no nervousness in his voice. No concern about the growing number of physicians surrounding him. The diagnostic platform activated, surrounding the human with layers of blue scanning light as millions of biological measurements streamed across the central display. Bone density, cardiovascular performance, immune activity, cellular regeneration, neurological function, blood chemistry, hydration, respiratory efficiency, and metabolic stability all appeared within expected human ranges according to the Earth medical files available to the Alliance. My senior laboratory specialist looked up from her console, clearly unsettled. "Chief Medical Officer, I cannot find anything unusual." I frowned. "Compare the results against enhanced military personnel." The station intelligence processed the request. Within seconds. No match. "Compare against experimental genetic modification." Again, the answer returned almost immediately. No enhancement detected. Ethan watched us exchange increasingly confused expressions before asking, "Is something wrong?" I looked directly at him. "Mr. Carter, have you ever participated in any medical enhancement program?" He laughed softly and shook his head. "No, I work in cargo logistics. My biggest challenge most days is making sure the right shipment ends up on the right dock." The room fell silent. Several physicians had quietly assumed we were examining a specially trained survival expert or a former military operative. Instead, the patient sitting before us loaded freight containers for a living. That realization made the situation even more difficult to explain. I immediately requested access to the educational archive Earth had shared through the Galactic Exchange Program. Thousands of instructional documents appeared on the main display. Family first aid manuals, public health guides, school safety lessons, workplace emergency training, outdoor recreation checklists, different regions, different decades, different communities. Yet every source repeated the same practical message. Ordinary people were expected to understand basic first aid long before they ever met a physician. Ethan glanced toward the display and smiled with recognition. I remember learning most of that when I was a kid. My deputy physician slowly turned toward me. Children. I enlarged the educational records. Elementary school health classes, community workshops, family preparedness campaigns. None of it was restricted knowledge. None of it required professional certification. It was simply considered responsible citizenship. At that moment, the investigation changed completely. We had spent the last hour searching for evidence that Ethan Carter was extraordinary, yet every new piece of information pointed in the opposite direction. He was not exceptional because he possessed abilities other humans lacked. He was exceptional only because he happened to be the first ordinary human our medical department had ever truly observed. I finally looked beyond the patient and toward the larger question that had been hiding in plain sight all along. If an average citizen from Earth approached uncertainty with this level of calm preparation, then perhaps the greatest mystery inside Trauma Bay 7 had never been the human sitting in front of us. Perhaps the real mystery was the world that had quietly taught millions of people to consider such remarkable resilience completely ordinary. Instead of ending the examination, I ordered the station intelligence to stop analyzing Ethan Carter and begin analyzing Earth itself. If every biological measurement confirmed that the human sitting before us was completely average, then the explanation had to exist somewhere beyond his body. The planetary archive opened across the main display, revealing environmental records collected through decades of diplomatic exchange. At first glance, Earth appeared beautiful. Vast oceans reflected sunlight across a blue world filled with forests, mountains, deserts, rivers, and frozen polar regions. Then the environmental statistics appeared beside those images, and the atmosphere inside Trauma Bay 7 changed completely. Seasonal temperature swings reached levels that would force many galactic civilizations to evacuate entire population centers. Wildfires, hurricanes, blizzards, earthquakes, and floods all occurred naturally on the same planet. Thousands of microorganisms surrounded humans every day. Countless plants and animals possessed natural defenses that demanded caution rather than panic. My deputy physician quietly enlarged one section of the report, showing common household safety recommendations from Earth. Emergency kits stored inside homes. First aid supplies kept inside family vehicles. Medical packs carried on hiking trips. Workplace safety stations. School emergency drills. Camping checklists. The same pattern appeared over and over again. Human civilization did not assume someone else would always solve the problem. It assumed ordinary people should be ready before help arrived. Ethan glanced toward the display and smiled with quiet recognition. That looks about right, he said. My parents always kept a first aid kit in the garage and another one in the truck. Nobody answered immediately. Across the room, several physicians continued reading translated family safety guides with expressions that shifted from curiosity to disbelief. One chapter advised parents to teach children how to clean minor injuries before they reached adolescence. Another encouraged travelers never to leave home without basic medical supplies. None of the material was presented as advanced knowledge. It was written in simple language for ordinary families. I slowly realized that every question we had been asking since Ethan entered the station had been backward. We kept wondering why humans remained calm during unexpected situations. The documents suggested an entirely different answer. Humans expected unexpected situations. They did not believe preparation guaranteed perfect safety. They believed preparation reduced unnecessary risk when life became unpredictable. A cultural researcher connected to the station archive submitted a comparative report only moments later. Most galactic civilizations had gradually transferred emergency responsibility almost entirely to automated systems and specialized professionals. Earth had embraced technology as well, but never abandoned the expectation that ordinary citizens should understand practical survival skills. The distinction seemed small until viewed beside Ethan Carter quietly sitting on the examination table with his freshly bandaged arm. He had never acted like a fearless hero. He had acted exactly like someone repeating lessons learned throughout childhood. My attention returned to the human, who looked around the room with genuine concern before asking, "Did I accidentally cause some kind of misunderstanding?" I almost laughed, though nothing about the situation was amusing anymore. "Mr. Carter," I answered honestly, "you did not create the misunderstanding. You simply revealed one that has existed inside galactic medicine for generations." At that moment, every physician in Trauma Bay 7 understood the same unsettling truth. We had not just underestimated one human. We had underestimated an entire civilization that quietly taught resilience as an ordinary part of growing up, and that discovery would prove far more important than any medical breakthrough we had ever celebrated. News traveled through Meridian Station faster than any official medical bulletin could contain it. Before the end of my shift, physicians from toxicology, xenobiology, environmental science, and emergency response were quietly gathering outside Trauma Bay 7, each hoping to understand why every diagnostic system insisted that Ethan Carter was perfectly healthy despite violating what they considered the most fundamental rules of medicine. Ethan seemed completely unaware of the attention surrounding him. He finished adjusting the clean bandage, placed the bottle back into his backpack, and politely thanked the nearest nurse for allowing him to borrow a waste container. Then he asked a question that somehow unsettled everyone even more. "Is there anywhere around here that serves decent coffee?" Several members of my staff stared at him without answering. One physician finally pointed toward the station concourse and quietly explained that a cafe was located 2 corridors away. Ethan smiled with obvious relief. "Perfect. I skipped breakfast this morning." That simple sentence echoed through the room. While an entire medical department struggled to explain what had just happened, the human's greatest concern was finding coffee before returning to work. My deputy physician leaned toward me and whispered, "Chief Medical Officer, he honestly believes this is over." She was right. Ethan did not think he had demonstrated extraordinary endurance or challenged established science. As far as he was concerned, he had cleaned a minor injury and was ready to continue his day. That realization forced me to examine the situation from an entirely different perspective. I requested one final comparison from the station intelligence. Instead of analyzing human biology, I asked it to compare everyday human preparedness with the average preparedness standards of Alliance citizens. The report appeared within seconds, and every line widened the gap between our civilizations. Human households routinely stored emergency supplies. Private vehicles often carried first aid kits. Schools practiced emergency response drills. Employers regularly reviewed safety procedures. Outdoor recreation guides encouraged travelers to prepare for unexpected situations before leaving home. None of these habits were considered remarkable on Earth. They were presented as ordinary responsibilities shared by ordinary people. Around me, researchers quietly read the translated documents with growing disbelief. One environmental scientist finally spoke. "They are not reacting to emergencies differently than we do. They are preparing for them long before they happen." No one argued because the evidence was overwhelming. We had mistaken preparation for fearlessness. Ethan Carter had never entered Trauma Bay 7 intending to impress anyone. He had simply relied on habits reinforced throughout his life. At that exact moment, my communication terminal emitted a priority alert. The Galactic Medical Council had officially requested every scanner log, every environmental analysis, every educational comparison, and every second of recorded footage from our examination room. The request carried emergency scientific authority, a designation normally reserved for discoveries capable of changing interstellar medical practice. I looked through the observation window as Ethan adjusted the strap of his backpack, thanked the reception staff for their patience, and walked toward the station cafe with the relaxed stride of someone whose biggest concern was whether the coffee would still be hot. Watching him disappear into the busy corridor, I finally understood the irony that none of us had recognized until then. The most significant medical discovery of our generation had quietly left the hospital believing he had simply stopped by to borrow a clean bandage before getting breakfast. Less than 48 hours later, I stood inside the Grand Assembly Chamber of the Galactic Medical Council, a place where discoveries capable of changing civilizations were debated for generations before becoming official policy. This time the debate had begun before I even arrived. Representatives from dozens of member worlds filled the chamber while hundreds more observed. Through secure holographic links, Every display in the room showed the same frozen image from Trauma Bay 7. Ethan Carter calmly holding an ordinary bottle while an entire medical department prepared for a catastrophe that never happened. The chair acknowledged my arrival and immediately requested the complete medical report without interpretation. They wanted facts before opinions. I replayed every diagnostic scan, every environmental comparison, every biological analysis, and finally the educational records from Earth that explained how ordinary families taught practical first aid long before children reached adulthood. The chamber remained silent throughout the presentation. When the final image disappeared, the questions began. Had Ethan received military survival training? No. Did he belong to a specialized emergency response organization? No. Had genetic screening revealed uncommon biological adaptations? Again, the answer was no. Every test confirmed the same conclusion. Ethan Carter represented the statistical average for a healthy adult human. That single fact unsettled the council more than anything else. If he had been extraordinary, the mystery would have ended there. Instead, every answer pointed toward an uncomfortable realization. Humanity itself had become the mystery. Then the council requested something I had almost forgotten. They wanted the inventory from Ethan's backpack. Customs records appeared on the central display only moments later. 1 bottle of rubbing alcohol, sterile gauze, adhesive bandages, medical tape, antiseptic wipes, tweezers, small scissors, disposable gloves, common pain relief medication, a compact first aid instruction card. Nothing exotic, nothing experimental, nothing restricted. One toxicologist slowly stood and asked the question everyone had been avoiding. Chief Medical Officer, are these specialized emergency supplies on Earth? I contacted Ethan through the station communications network. He answered almost immediately, apologizing because he was in the middle of unloading cargo containers. When I read the inventory aloud, he sounded genuinely confused. Specialized? Not really. Most pharmacies carry all of that. Plenty of grocery stores do too. Almost everybody I know keeps something similar at home, and lots of people keep another kit in the car. I activated the chamber speakers so every delegate could hear his answer directly. Several representatives quietly exchanged uncertain glances. The chair thanked Ethan for his time before ending the connection, then turned back toward the assembly with an expression I had never seen before. Colleagues, he said slowly, we believed we were investigating one remarkable patient. We were actually examining the ordinary habits of an entire civilization. Environmental researchers immediately presented additional evidence gathered since my original report. Human schools, workplaces, community organizations, outdoor recreation programs, and even family traditions consistently reinforced practical preparedness instead of dependence. Their culture encouraged citizens to solve immediate problems calmly until experts arrived. By the end of the session, no one questioned the conclusion anymore. Ethan Carter had not astonished the galaxy because he possessed abilities beyond other humans. He astonished us because he quietly demonstrated what millions of ordinary people on Earth had considered completely normal for generations. And that realization forced the greatest medical minds in known space to admit they had misunderstood humanity from the very beginning. 1 week after the council concluded its investigation, an invitation unlike any other arrived at Meridian Station. Ethan Carter was not being summoned as a patient or as a research subject. He was being invited to speak before the newly established Interstellar Medical Education Committee, a gathering responsible for training every future physician across the Galactic Alliance. When I informed him of the request, he looked genuinely surprised. "Are they sure they want me?" he asked. "I am not a doctor," I answered with complete honesty. "That is exactly why they requested you." Ethan accepted only after confirming the meeting would not interfere with his work schedule. The following morning, he entered the education chamber carrying the same weathered backpack that had unintentionally changed the direction of galactic medicine. Hundreds of instructors, physicians, researchers, and medical students filled the enormous auditorium, expecting to hear an extraordinary survivor describe impossible biological abilities. Instead, they watched an ordinary cargo logistics technician greet everyone politely before taking a simple seat at the center of the room. The chair began with a question every physician believed would finally reveal the secret. "Mr. Carter, who taught you the first aid procedures you demonstrated aboard Meridian Station?" Ethan answered without hesitation. My parents showed me the basics when I was young. My teachers reinforced it in school. My employers reviewed it during workplace safety training. I have picked up a few extra tips over the years, but nothing unusual. The auditorium became remarkably quiet. One instructor raised another question. Were your parents healthcare professionals? Ethan smiled and shook his head. No. My father repaired heating and electrical systems. My mother taught elementary school. A ripple of confusion spread through the audience. Another physician leaned forward. Then why were they qualified to teach emergency care? Ethan looked genuinely puzzled. Because parents teach practical life skills. Cooking, changing a flat tire, using tools safely, basic first aid. That is just part of growing up where I come from. Several medical students immediately began comparing his answers with the revised educational guidelines now displayed across their tablets. Every statement matched the evidence already collected by the council. Humanity had never reserved practical preparedness for specialists alone. It had quietly distributed that responsibility throughout society. The discussion continued for nearly 2 hours, yet the most powerful moments came from Ethan's simplest observations. He explained that helping someone before professional responders arrived was considered common courtesy rather than extraordinary heroism. He described first aid kits as ordinary household items instead of specialized equipment. He spoke about preparation not as a response to fear, but as a way of respecting both yourself and the people around you. By the time the session concluded, I looked around the chamber and realized something remarkable had happened. The audience was no longer studying one human. They were studying an entire philosophy of responsibility. As Ethan quietly thanked everyone for inviting him and prepared to return to his cargo terminal, the chair addressed the future physicians one final time. Today you have not learned why one man remained calm. You have learned why an entire civilization produces ordinary citizens capable of remaining calm. In that moment, I finally understood the true lesson hidden behind every medical report we had reviewed. Humanity's greatest strength had never been extraordinary endurance. It was the quiet decision, repeated across generations, to teach ordinary people that preparation is an act of responsibility. And that single idea proved more powerful than any technology our galaxy had ever created. Several months after Ethan Carter returned to his ordinary routine, the first graduates trained under the revised galactic medical curriculum completed their certification examinations. I attended the ceremony as a representative of Meridian Station, expecting a formal event filled with speeches and statistics. Instead, I witnessed something far more meaningful. Every graduating physician was required to complete one final simulation before receiving a medical license. The scenario appeared deceptively simple. A human civilian entered an emergency department carrying a small backpack and requesting nothing more than a clean place to treat a minor injury. Years earlier, every student would have reacted exactly as my staff had, assuming the human required immediate intervention before causing irreversible harm. This time the outcome was entirely different. The trainees calmly assessed the patient, asked thoughtful questions about human first aid practices, confirmed the procedure matched established Earth medical guidelines, and provided assistance only where it was genuinely needed. The simulation concluded with every student passing, not because they memorized new chemical tables, but because they had learned something far more valuable. They had learned to understand the patient before judging the treatment. Watching the examination unfold, I realized that the greatest change had never occurred inside our laboratories. It had occurred inside the minds of future physicians. Later that afternoon, the Education Committee released its first comprehensive report on the revised curriculum. Medical misunderstandings involving human civilians had already declined dramatically across Alliance space. Emergency departments reported faster communication, greater trust between species, and fewer unnecessary interventions caused by cultural assumptions. Human visitors also expressed greater confidence when seeking medical care because physicians now asked questions before making conclusions. The report described the results as one of the most successful educational reforms in galactic history. What impressed me even more was how humanity responded. Earth authorities accepted every invitation to cooperate without demanding recognition or special status. Human instructors volunteered to teach practical first aid workshops alongside alien specialists, while Alliance physicians shared advanced diagnostic techniques in return. Instead of competing over which civilization possessed superior medicine, both sides quietly combined their strengths. The relationship became stronger because each accepted that the other had something worth learning. I received one final update from Ethan several weeks later. His supervisor had nominated him for an Employee Recognition Award, not because of anything related to medicine, but because he had spent months helping train newly hired workers in workplace safety and emergency preparedness. When I read the report, I could not help smiling. Even after changing the direction of galactic medical education, he had returned to doing exactly what he had always done, teaching ordinary people how to stay prepared. The more I reflected on that simple fact, the more obvious the truth became. We had searched for an extraordinary hero when the real lesson had always been hidden inside ordinary habits repeated consistently over time. Every revised medical textbook, every updated classroom, every newly trained physician across the Alliance now carried a small piece of that lesson forward. None of it existed because humanity possessed impossible biology alone. It existed because one civilization quietly understood that knowledge shared with everyone becomes far more powerful than knowledge reserved for a few. Looking across the graduation hall as hundreds of young physicians accepted their certifications, I realized they were not merely entering the medical profession. They were becoming the first generation to treat humanity not as a biological mystery to be feared, but as a civilization whose greatest contribution to the galaxy was proving that calm preparation, shared responsibility, and practical wisdom could transform the future more effectively than panic ever could. 5 standard years have passed since the morning an ordinary cargo worker walked into Trauma Bay 7 carrying a worn backpack and quietly reminded the galaxy that true strength often hides inside the simplest habits. I still serve as Chief Medical Officer aboard Meridian Station, but the hospital around me is no longer the one I once believed I understood. Every new physician who arrives here begins training with the same case study. They do not memorize it because of an impossible medical miracle. They study it because it teaches the most important lesson modern medicine has ever learned. Listen before you judge. Understand before you intervene. Respect a civilization before assuming your own knowledge is complete. The updated Galactic Emergency Medicine Manual now rests on every diagnostic terminal across Alliance space. The opening chapter contains a sentence that did not exist before Ethan Carter unknowingly changed history. It reminds physicians that human biology cannot be separated from human culture because preparation, responsibility, and practical knowledge shape medical outcomes just as profoundly as anatomy itself. Young doctors no longer react with fear when a human reaches for familiar first aid supplies. Instead, they ask respectful questions, compare established Earth medical guidance, and work alongside their patients whenever possible. What once created panic now creates cooperation. Reports from every major medical center confirm the same remarkable pattern. Trust between human visitors and alien physicians has reached the highest level ever recorded. Emergency misunderstandings have declined dramatically. Joint research programs continue producing discoveries neither civilization could have achieved alone. Yet the individual responsible for beginning all of this remains almost completely unchanged. From time to time, I still receive short messages from Ethan Carter. They are never about recognition, awards, or historical significance. Sometimes he asks how the staff is doing. Sometimes he recommends a new brand of coffee available on Earth. Once he apologized because he had forgotten to return a pen he borrowed during his examination years earlier. Every message reminds me of the same truth. He never considered himself extraordinary. That is precisely why his story became extraordinary. Visitors occasionally ask whether the famous human from the medical archives truly existed. I simply smile and point toward the emergency entrance where this journey began. Then I tell them that the most important detail has never been the bottle, the bandage, or the medical reports. The important detail was the quiet confidence of a man who trusted lessons passed from parents to children, teachers to students, and neighbors to friends across countless generations. Humanity never conquered the galaxy through overwhelming force. Humanity earned the galaxy's respect because ordinary people accepted responsibility for one another long before anyone called them heroes. Looking back now, I realize I was completely wrong on the day Ethan first entered my hospital. I believed medicine existed only inside laboratories, hospitals, and scientific journals. Humanity showed me that medicine also lives inside family traditions, school classrooms, workplace safety meetings, camping trips, kitchen cabinets, and simple acts of kindness repeated every day. That discovery changed far more than our textbooks. It changed the way an entire galaxy understood what it truly means to care for another living being. And whenever a new physician asks why humans seem so remarkably resilient, I no longer begin with biology. I begin with Earth itself, because that ordinary world quietly taught millions of ordinary people one extraordinary lesson. The best time to prepare for an emergency is long before anyone realizes one has begun.